Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm talking about Halo 2 again, and specifically what makes it such a great sequel and all the innovations it makes from Halo 1. Halo 2 does a lot of things to expand on Halo 1 in the story and gameplay. It also does something that a lot of sequels can't do, which is not having the exact story of the first game in the series. Being a sequel to a critically acclaimed game, it is hard to follow that up with a story that takes risks and does something different. Halo 2's story was risky. It was a bold move to make half the game from the point of view of the Covenant. The Covenant in general was not explored in the first game. We really knew next to nothing about them. The story of Halo 1 focused on fleshing out the world and the Halo rings themselves, but because we already knew about those things in Halo 2, the story was able to focus on other things like Earth, the Flood, and of course the Covenant. Halo 2 expands on the story greatly with the introduction of the Covenant and the Arbiter. This lets the players see what it's like in the Covenant and see what their society is like. For the players, the Arbiter is that window into the Covenant. Through the Arbiter, we get to see what they're like. Also, the Arbiter himself is great. The Arbiter has one of the best stories in Halo. His story about slowly realizing the great journey is a lie is amazing to watch over the course of the game. He gradually shifts to the other side over the course of the game, where he sees the heretic leader, hears from the Oracle what happens when the rings are activated, and even makes a truce with Sergeant Johnson of all people. Only then does he finally realize that the prophets have lied to them and that the Covenant is built on lies. The whole story in general is great. The characters too are amazing. In Halo 2, we get introduced to the Spec Ops commander Tartarus, the prophets, the Gravemind, Miranda Keyes, and Lord Hood. Sergeant Johnson as well. He's not entirely a new character, but he does get a lot more screen time in this game compared to Combat Evolved. Speaking of the Gravemind, its addition is huge for the story. The Gravemind shows us just how threatening the Flood is. It can gain the knowledge of every being it consumes. It has been here for years gaining knowledge. The Flood even takes over the entire city of High Charity. This shows how big of a threat they are to the entire galaxy, and this is just with one Gravemind. The story is fantastic in Halo 2, but Halo 2 also made a lot of innovations on the gameplay side of things. For one thing, Halo 2 did a great job at polishing the vehicle sandbox. In Halo 1, the vehicles sometimes didn't feel the best to use or drive. They sometimes felt like you were sliding around, but Halo 2 completely removes that feeling. The vehicle sandbox in Halo 2 is much more refined. The Ghost and the Warthog both have a new sense of weight to them. They feel maneuverable and good to drive. The Banshee as well received changes for the better. Again, it feels maneuverable and weighty. It also has the ability to do barrel rolls and flips in the sky, which helps make combat more diverse and dynamic. The sandbox is much improved from Halo 1, because there are many new additions like dual wielding. Dual wielding is a great new mechanic that makes many of the lesser guns feel actually useful. Some of the guns like the SMG or the plasma rifle aren't the best on their own, but if you pair them up with another gun, then they can be very deadly. There were also many new weapons added to the game. The battle rifle was added to replace the Magnum, which is much less useful now. The assault rifle was replaced by the SMG, and there were many new additions to the Covenant weapons. The carbine and the beam rifle were new to Halo 2. The carbine and the beam rifle in particular were big changes to the sandbox. They gave the player more options to use, but the big thing they did for the game was make the Covenant actually able to counter the player at a long range. While some people hate sniper jackals, they are very important to the game because without them, the Covenant would not have a way to counter the player at long distances. So the sandbox was improved on in Halo 2, but another thing that also got a big upgrade was the level design. In Halo 1, a lot of the levels were big open areas. Some people liked this, but the levels overall were stale and boring at some points. Big open fields are cool, but they weren't very dynamic. Halo 2 changes this with its level design being much more dense. Halo 2's levels are more linear, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Halo 2 cut a lot of the fat from Halo 1. The levels are much more dense and focused. Each level is a linear path with a couple arenas throughout. Arenas are pretty much a new addition in Halo 2. They're large, multi-story areas where you fight enemies for a prolonged period of time, whether it be because you're completing an objective, there's an obstacle, or for whatever reason it may be. Arenas like this were mostly absent from Halo 1, but they're the best part of Halo 2's level design. It's a very dynamic experience because you're constantly moving throughout the area. All of the elements of the sandbox and the level design combine beautifully to make the core gameplay as good as it is. Dual wielding and the new weapons make it so that you're constantly switching weapons, and the arenas make it so that you're constantly moving. The gameplay is much faster and again dynamic than Halo 1. Dual wielding in particular is a big thing that helps the gameplay loop of constantly switching weapons. The developers said that they wanted the player to be able to use any weapon they find and not have to worry about saving ammo. The levels are designed in a way that supports this philosophy because you can go from using dual SMGs in one area to using a beam rifle in the next. Dual wielding really supports the idea of constantly switching weapons because you can't dual wield for an entire level. You can't use dual SMGs for an entire level. Ammo is a thing, and also while you're dual wielding, you can't switch weapons, throw grenades, or even melee without dropping one of your guns. The core gameplay loop is crafted in a way that makes Halo 2 much faster and more dynamic than Halo 1. After hearing me say that the levels in Halo 2 are more dense and focused than in Halo 1, would you believe me if I said that the developers wanted Halo 2's levels to be larger than Halo 1's? True, the levels are more dense, smaller, and more linear, but the actual worlds the levels take place in are much larger and feel more realistic and fleshed out. Take for example the Pillar of Autumn from Halo CE. There were a lot of corridors with not a lot of windows. It doesn't do a great job of portraying that you're in a big spaceship. Cairo Station from Halo 2 does a better job at this because of the many windows and the section where you actually go outside of the station. You can see the entire station and even the things going on outside of the station. You can see the ships in the distance, and the elevator part lets you see the giant mag gun. You can see it shoot rounds into space that shake the whole station. Another example of the world feeling more realistic is the beach on Outskirts. From the beach, you can see all the way to the bridge that you drive down in the next mission. It's small details like this that help to make the world feel more immersive and real. So in conclusion, Halo 2 is a great sequel to Halo Combat Evolved because it expands on the story, improves the sandbox and level design, and improves the overall world design. That's about it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Do the YouTube things if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. After hearing me say that the levels in Halo 2 are more dense and focused than in Halo 1, would you believe me if I said that Bro, I can't talk.